Unturned is presented by UpdateAI.
I think the part that I get the most concerned about is the client confusion, right? I never want the client to feel like they're having a bad experience. So this question of, oh, do I reach out to team member A or team member B? And I think it takes time.
I just CC both. I CC everybody, and who cares about the time?
Someone will get back to me. Exactly.
Yeah. Like, is that really a win that the customer has to navigate their way to the right person, and then like they finally figured out, they finally got to the person who can answer their question, and that's like that's like a hallmark moment for you? I feel like that's like a churn indicator.
Okay, well then, show me a SaaS company that hasn't gone through massive change over the last 3 to 6 months, where you have to have that process.
John, why are you fighting with Josh?
Hey, everybody, and happy post-Thanksgiving week. I'm Josh Schachter, your co-host with the most, and I'm here today again with Jon Johnson and Kristi Faltorusso, our other co-hosts of Unturned. We're very excited.
Are we?
Yeah, we're always very excited, John.
This is the first time that I was just going to say, we haven't recorded all three of us in a while.
Yeah.
Well, that's not why I'm so excited. I'm excited because of our guest.
It's never about us.
It's never about us. You're going to introduce her, or she's just going to sit
it's
quietly
always about you guys. Tatiana Ferreira.
Yes.
Tatiana is the Chief Customer Officer of Launchmetrics, who's only been at Launchmetrics for just a short stint.
9 years.
Yeah, a lowly nine years at the company. 10 years is when they give her the Rolex, is what I hear.
They still do that? No.
Even longer than that, if we go further back history in the company, because Launchmetrics is part of our story. But I stopped counting at 10 anyway, so don't want to age myself. But thank you. I'm super excited to be here with you all. Also very excited. And Josh, I'm excited that you're excited. Maybe John, not so excited because it's the first Monday after the long weekend.
I know. It's good. Well, at least all of our heat is working, Tatiana, unlike yours. So
I know. Hopefully that'll be fixed for me soon. But yes, very excited to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm excited to hear more about what you guys do, because you're a leading firm in the brand performance space to understand the value of a brand. And this is particularly interesting to me today because, as John and Kristi know, my girlfriend, maybe not, soon to be fiance.
It's totally up to her. Totally up to her.
It depends on what she says. And I date 50-50.
Yeah, I may or may not be getting messages from her every single day asking when. However, that being said, she runs events. She's going to absolutely annihilate me when she comes back from Miami. She runs events at Cartier, and they are having their big, Art Basel, Miami adjacent Trinity 100-year anniversary, blah, 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 museum event out there. And it's they spend so much money on brand.
Yep.
And this whole intro, by the way, was just a way for me to troll her. So when she listens to this episode,
I was like, I understood three of those words, Josh.
I'm just curious, why I didn't get the +1 invite from Jess.
So Jess, if you're listening, if you want to fly to Miami,
I'm real sad. I'll go meet her right now.
Yeah, Jess, if you're listening, what Kristi really wants, we know, is the discount.
Yeah.
It doesn't come without friendship
and trust.
That's true. So there's a lot of money poured into brand for luxury and for other brands as well. And my question always how do you measure the return on that? I mean, it's absurd, kind of some of what some of these companies pay. And we live in a SaaS world where it's all about what's your CAC and how do you value your demand gen and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing. And then I want to go into the history of your company because, like you mentioned, 9 years plus you've been with the company, because there's been some evolution there, so to say.
Exactly. I mean, you've teed it up really well for me.
I always do.
In speaking about the brand, usually I tell people, Launchmetrics, we help fashion, beauty, lifestyle brands with data and software to help them with their brand performance. And they're like, they're what? It doesn't really make sense. But especially when you use an example like Cartier, I feel like that explains it so easily, right? In the sense, the brand, that reason why, intrinsic reason why consumers want to buy from one brand versus another. And exactly, it's super difficult to value what that is, to be efficient in it. And this industry, fashion and beauty, lifestyle, if you want to throw that in there, it changes so fast as well. And I think especially post-COVID, it's just keeps changing. There's more demand from brands and all, especially within marketing and PR, new markets to go into, new places to measure. They kind of have to be everywhere, right? Meet consumers where they are. So that's what we do, basically. We help brands with their brand performance, and not just the measurement of it. That's definitely one piece of it, but also building brand performance. So when you think of building brand performance, there are a lot of different operational activities that can go into that. And for us, we help brands do that through our software. So we have operational tools that help brands do that. So whether it's tracking where a sample is going from a fashion brand to an influencer or a celebrity walking down the red carpet, or to managing an event. So much like this Miami Art Basel event, sending out invitations, doing check-in, everything that makes them more efficient so that they can work smarter, not harder, just like technology is supposed to help us all do. And then on the other side of that, measure the performance, right? So, okay, I did all these activities, I did all these campaigns, but what worked and what didn't work? And back not so long ago, really the only kind of measurement or data points brands had were things like reach, engagement, circulation, if you start talking about like print magazines and going further back, whereas we have a dollar amount that we give to brands to measure that. So they measure themselves, and then moreover, they can measure their competitors to understand, okay, how are we performing, but also what are our competitors doing, to be able to pivot, iterate on that strategy quarter after quarter, year after year.
Tatiana, I have a quick question. This, and I could be so off base, it's giving me like public relations vibes. Is it similar? Is it not? Like, are these two completely different worlds? I just feel like a lot of what you're talking about here aligns to what I know about public relations.
Yeah, you nailed it. So that is our core buyer, if you will. Our users are all within PR, marketing, communications, to measure and activate their brand performance. Exactly right.
So I want to talk about the history of the company, and a lot of that is your history with the company. They've kind of gone hand in hand. Tell our listeners about, and I'm not going to get it right, so I'm not going to try to retell it, but like tell us about the history of all the M&A and stuff, because I want to get us into that conversation of how to bring it all together when you're in that leadership position that you find yourself in.
Yeah, and it's definitely been the most challenging part of my position, I would say, is navigating all that. But Launchmetrics, we actually started as a merger from two companies, Fashion GPS and OKRs. For any U.S. listeners who potentially work in fashion, a lot of people know the Fashion GPS name. We got our name by powering Fashion Week here in New York. But that's really where we started and where I started. And we were as startup as they come. When I joined, we were 5 people and we did everything. Customer success didn't exist. So I was support, I was sales, I was onboarding, I was the janitor when you needed to do that too, like really true startup culture back then. But in 2015, we merged with a French company called OKRs, and we did the operational side. They did the more data metrics side, and we became Launchmetrics. And then since then, we had 5 acquisitions that we were a part of, that we bought, other companies. And then most recently, at the beginning of this year, getting my timeline right, we were acquired. So it kind of flipped the other way. And we were acquired by a French company called Lectra. So yes, a lot of different moving parts over the 10 plus years.
And now just going back to the 5 people that you started with, where you were doing it all, now you've got 100 people in your org, about 40 CSMs, about 40 on the ProServe side, and solution consultants. So quite the growth there organically and inorganically.
Yeah, exactly. I've been working with some people for a very, very long time. It's been part of the fun, though, of course.
With all those change, I mean, it's obviously that's a lot of changes. You would think, not just like we hired somebody new, but organizational changes, right? How do you as a leader continue kind of the stability with your individual contributors and folks on your team that are kind of getting thrown into the ringer over and over and over again? Has there been a lot of change when it comes to goals? Has there been kind of a lot of like those process organizational changes? Walk me through how you keep the ship steady for your team.
Yeah, and it definitely depends on the moment in time that we talk about. Every acquisition has been different, of course, depending on the employees, the way that they've worked in the past, how service heavy they are. I would say that's been, to be honest, the biggest learning points for me. I would say on the Launchmetrics fashion GPS side, we were very, very software driven. So of course, every SaaS company, you have services elements, right? Even if it's just your onboarding, let's say, there's a service component to that. But some of the other companies that we acquired were more on the pro services side. So we have a reporting offer that's part of what we do. So that means people who are creating reports, looking at data, analyzing. It's a lot of billable time you're talking about. So that was a huge change and shift for me and for us acquiring those companies. And I would say it's really listening as well. Like I think when you are being acquired, it's always that scary, what are they going to change? What are they going to do? Who are they going to lay off? I think that's with any company. And so making sure that you're communicating as openly and as honestly as you can about what's going on, knowing that, of course, there are things that are going to be proprietary sometimes, but keeping that door open. And as you know, information that can be shared, sharing it, sharing the vision, and sharing that you might not have it all figured out. That's something that I just said to someone on my team last week. I was like, okay, we tried something. I know it's not working. I'm not blind to the fact that it's not perfect, but we tried, right? We tried and we now know it doesn't work. So now let's try something else. Just being as open as you can, I hope keeps people motivated and part of the reason why they stay.
So listening is huge.
Yep.
During a time where there's more sensitivity as teams are evolving, coming together and breaking up in many ways as well. What else is in that PMI playbook, that post-merger integration playbook from your couple of experiences going through this?
I think finding alignment as part of that listening, right? So pointing out like there's not as many differences as maybe you think there is or there are. Understanding what makes the employees tick as well. Like, okay, what are you motivated by? For some people, it's not always the things that seem obvious, right? So I'm talking about salary, bonus, compensation package, et cetera. For some people, it is about, well, I've done this for my whole career. How can I make sure that I don't lose control over my customers or what I'm doing, and kind of making them see the light, so to speak. So understand, okay, maybe you're not going to do things in the exact same way that you were before. Let's understand what those things are. Let's understand what's taking up a lot of your time and how can we break that up to be more effective in what you're doing and really good at and enjoying versus trying to do everything. Because I feel like that's the common thread, I would say, with a lot of the companies that we've acquired. And I feel lucky in saying that I feel like a lot of the team that we've inherited are so passionate about their customers, but almost to a fault. And I've been there myself. I'm still there sometimes with some clients, right? You care too much. You want to do everything, be that single point of contact, but then you can also be the single point of failure. And that's not good either. So I think too, like breaking up what their responsibilities are today to then map like, okay, what can that look like in a future scenario? And making sure, again, the dialogue is there. If you change someone's role overnight and you're like, actually, this isn't what you're doing anymore. This is now what you're doing. This is what you're measured against. I'd be willing to bet that even if a great compensation package was thrown their way with that, they would still be really uncomfortable and potentially unhappy, right? Like, of course, compensation is part of it, but it's not the only thing. And we need to be sensitive to that.
Tatiana, one of the things that I've always kind of anchored on is this: people like change to happen with them, not to them. So how do you bring folks along through the, make them feel, even if it's by perception, make them feel like they're included in the redesign as you navigate some of these big changes?
So one of the goal setting framework we do use is OKRs. I'm a big fan of OKRs. We've used that for a long time. And I think even that, you kind of realize like, oh, maybe not everyone is familiar with objective key results, in case any listeners are not. I'm sure most of your listeners are, but in case people are not familiar, even explaining like, this is what they are, this is why we're doing it, it's because we all feel like part of the same ship and we're steering in the right direction, right? And having that, again, including them on that conversation, like this is what they were last year, this is what we did, this is what we didn't do. How do you see it? Why do you feel like we didn't achieve what we needed to achieve? What would you change? How would you structure the OKRs versus maybe just taking your middle management layer, if you're a leader, just listening to them? And that's kind of where the OKR setting stops. I think really listening to the employees is how you make sure they feel a part of it too, and that they are, again, like part of that change versus the change just happening to them. So involving them in that. I'm also, generally speaking, I try to do as many skip level meetings as I can, maybe not with individual employees, but at least with different teams, right? We used to travel a lot more before COVID. Travel has picked back up. We're a big global footprint company, even if we're not huge in terms of number of employees, but getting FaceTime with people, we're all people. So I think just getting to know them also in person on a personal level and having those conversations when you can in person helps a lot. But yeah, breaking down those potential barriers that are there and having open conversations about what works and what doesn't work. I think sometimes that's a hard pill to swallow as leaders, what doesn't work, because usually there's a reason why. It's because I wanted to implement this thing, but it got cut from the budget or whatever, right? We have the reasons behind the why, but it's important for you to still know that the team isn't happy with whatever it might be, that there's still an issue that needs to be addressed.
Tell us a little bit about the way you're organized now. I mentioned a little bit of the headcount, but talk a little bit more about the structure of your post-sales org, how they interact with each other, a little bit about the coverage model and those sorts of things.
Yep. And we are still in transitioning again. I feel like every year or two, we transition a bit. But most recently, the last acquisition we did, we are still integrating. So there's still a bit changing. But formally speaking, today we have our customer success org, and they are split into, let's say, the two sides of our cloud product, right? So they're specialized CSMs. And a lot of times you kind of see that. I've seen it at other organizations where it's by product. But for us, we have done it by the grouping. So if you are a CSM that's focused on the operational part of our cloud or tool set, you are responsible for, let's say, knowing true and true 3 of the 6 products that we have. And you are owning the customer relationship, the adoption, the EBRs, the value, the renewal, et cetera, on that part of the product suite. And then we have other CSMs that are specialized on the more metrics side of the product suite that we have. So they should be more in the know with what's happening, not just with the industry in terms of data and performance, but know a little bit more about how to interpret data, look at data, to be more of a thought leader for the customer, because arguably when you're talking data, that's where the value comes in, is understanding the data. So it's allowed them to go deeper in the product set, know more, not just about what it is the products do, but again, the value that the products are being. And that was a tricky change for us. And it's still ongoing. Again, because we were organized in a way where even on the CS side, you were the single point of contact for your customer when it came to CS. But when you're doing that across 6 different products and you're responsible for the successful adoption, it gets impossible at one point. So even that change, acquisitions aside, just even with the existing team, was a big change for them of understanding, but okay, that's weird. Like I used to just speak to this person and now I have to share my customer with somebody else. Like how are EBRs going to work? And it's like, well, the two of you can be present. That's okay. Like you can own one part of it and talk to one part and the other CSM will talk to the other part. And the reason for that change also was to then find better growth opportunities, et cetera. So create focus. So that's our CS structure. Aside from the specialized,
so you have multiple CSMs that can be interacting with a single customer. I would imagine that, like you said, there's benefits. There's more hands on deck. There's more. There's deeper knowledge on different parts of the overall platform. Probably the trade-off is there's just more.
It's not. Yes, yeah. Not Josh's strong point.
Weak points, right? Of communication drop off. Yes, communication. Yes. Well, that's the word that I'm struggling to find. Yes, Jon.
We have to talk more.
Yes. Yeah. So did you see? Have you seen any hiccups of that, and how are you addressing that?
Yeah, sometimes it's are they going to answer or am I going to answer? And then it kind of falls in no man's land. So for sure that's been a challenge that we've tried to address. And I think it's become clearer with time. Like, okay, well, if it again is speaking to or connected to the part of the cloud that I'm responsible for overseeing, then it should be me, and vice versa. So that's for sure part of it. I think the part that I get the most concerned about is the client confusion, right? I never want the client to feel like they're having a bad experience. So this question of, do I reach out to team member A or team member B? That I will first-handedly admit is like painful if I have customers who have that feeling, and I'm sure they do. But at some point, you kind of have to make that decision of the trade-off, right? Like, is it going to be better long-term for the customer, even if it's confusing at the get-go? And little by little with time, they too start understanding who to reach out to for what. And you can make that argument for anything, right? Salespeople and CSMs. Do I reach out to my salesperson? Do I reach out to my CSMs? And I think it takes time.
I just CC both. I CC everybody, and who cares about the time?
Someone will get back to me. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, it's Josh. I'm taking a quick break from the podcast to tell you a bit about UpdateAI. I started UpdateAI to solve two major challenges for CS teams. The first is that we save CSMs 4 to 5 hours per week with our productivity through AI. Secondly, we give leaders a window into all the conversations across each account and the entire portfolio. So we help knowledge transfer, we help increase the coverage model of your CS teams, and we help you detect emerging patterns in what your customers are telling your CSMs across all the risks, product feedback, advocacy moments, and expansion opportunities. So come check us out at www.updateai. It's completely free to sign up and trial.
I think I really like that point. So much of what we do in this industry is changing. And I think as CSMs, we're like, oh my gosh, we have to make it so comfortable for our customers that pendulum swings probably quite a bit too much. And we kind of forget that it's like, I mean, every 3 or 4 months when I send an email to my AT&T rep, it's somebody new, and I figure it out, right? Like part of that process is learning not just the correct path, but also where to go to get to the correct path. And I like the way that you're kind of communicating that, at least internally, to say like they might reach out to the wrong person, and that's okay. But everybody internally knows where they need to go, and we'll get them in the right space. Some of my favorite moments are when that customer finally like clicks. It's like, oh, I finally got the right time at the right person, and they have that little win.
Is that really a win, John? I don't know, man. Like, is that really a win that the customer has to navigate their way to the right person, and then like they finally figured out, they finally got to the person who can answer their question, and that's like that's like a hallmark moment for you? I feel like that's like a churn indicator.
Okay, well then, show me a SaaS company that hasn't gone through massive change over the last 3 to 6 months, where you have to have that process.
John, why are you fighting with Josh, who's never done customer success before? Let him go on his own journey.
Yeah, but I well, okay, Kristi.
Well, I wouldn't celebrate that as a win, but we are happy when it does get it figured out.
I'm not saying that's our goal. I'm saying it's fun when the customer that always goes to the wrong person finally gets the hint and actually sends it to the right person. That's fun.
Because you know what? Do you want to hear me on the phone as a customer when I finally get to the right person?
I'm just
glad you're not my customer.
It's fine. I said, Tatiana, do you have anything you want to talk about Josh poorly?
It's that time in the recording.
I too, though, understand when it's a customer how frustrating it is. Like I said, it's painful for me too to like imagine when it goes the wrong way, but it's a trade-off. Like at some point, something's got to give. You have to do what's best for them, even if they don't always know what's best for them, which is also sometimes a reality. And I think anyone who's been in CS knows that.
So what's the trade-off? You mentioned it, but like, what's the big thing that's pushing the pendulum over in that trade-off for you? And I'm sorry if I missed it.
No, well, when you have one point of contact as a customer, right, you're most likely going to get an answer faster, right? One person, they're all automatically going to come back to you. But when you have a point of contact
consortium
supposed to know everything, they probably don't. So yes, you might have one point of contact that you reach out to, but then you have the risk of them either potentially giving, I don't want to say the wrong information, but maybe not the best recommendation or information, right? I'm trying to do something. I'm trying to create a report. I'm trying to read what this data is telling me. You have a CSM that knows a little bit of everything. They're probably going to be like, oh yeah, you can do this, whatever this may be. But if you have someone who's specialized, can go deep, they're going to give you the best recommendation when we think about advising customers. So that's the trade-off. Do you want like a quick response that like maybe is going to be good enough? Or do you want the person who's going to advise you in the best way possible, even if it takes a bit longer to get to that person?
And you just felt like there's certain complexities and silos around your product that facilitates that type of setup for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Makes sense.
And anyone who has it figured out, I'm happy to connect and speak to any kind of leader who has that, because I think anyone with a complex SaaS product, it's tricky, and I don't know that it's perfect.
No, but I like that you're experimenting, that you're pushing the bounds, that you're trying to iterate and figure out new models, right? Like that's actually the really important takeaway for me. So right now we are close to the end of the year. We are all thinking about priorities and budgets and whatnot for next year. But tell us, like, what's your priority going into Q1 at the beginning of the year?
It's a great question, because I think there are many. If I probably have to choose one, and I've talked about this even this year, so I think by saying it's a Q1 priority, I'm cheating a little bit, because it's a 2024 priority that's moved a bit. But automation, again, I think due to our history, it's the reality. We have a complicated, let's say, technical setup, right? A lot of legacy code, data lives in different places, et cetera. I'm not the right person to get into the technical complexities of it all, but it's hard to get access to the right data at the right time when you need it. And we need that if we're ever going to automate and scale in the way that I would love to as a post-sales and CS organization. We have customers of a lot of different sizes, right? So when we were talking about the CS setup, we have specialized CSMs, but then we also have it by tiers of customers. I think that's pretty common for a lot of CS orgs, right? So enterprise or tier 1 versus SMB or tier 2, tier 3. We also have CSMs focused in that way. But when you get to that, let's say, lower tier, when you have a one-to-many approach, then it becomes difficult in a different way for those CSMs, right? So automating customer outreach specifically for us is a big initiative that, like I said, we've been trying to push this year that will inevitably fall into Q1, but making sure that, for customers not using the product or not using a certain key adoption feature, that we're reaching out to them at the right time and not leaving it all in the hands of the CSM, because that can get impossible the bigger your book of business is growing.
What's in your tech stack right now, if you can share?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes. We are using Gainsight. We also use Salesforce, but Gainsight on the CS side is what we're using and trying to build the automated communications from the digital journey, if you will. And for us,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not just the technical side. So of course that's part of it, but then again, coming back to the earlier point in the conversation, for some CSMs, it's also rethinking the way they think, right? Because then they're like, well, what if the wrong email communication goes out to my customer? Then it's embarrassing on me. So also explaining to them, it's okay. Automation is a good thing. It should give you back some time, but making sure it's done right is priority number one.
That's actually kind of what I was going to ask. Obviously, this is kind of a new skill set for a lot of folks that are either kind of newer to CS, but also maybe haven't had access to all of the tools or experiences that some of us have had with Gainsight and these other great tools out there. How are you keeping, and how are your leaders keeping your CSMs kind of on top of the fact that it's supposed to change every 3 or 4 months? We're not going to have the one playbook to rule them all again for 3 years that we just kind of use as a Bible. It's got to be this kind of constant flux. How do you build trust and empower them to find comfort in that when it's not necessarily something that's been in our industry before?
Yeah. I think the way you build trust with anything is proving that it works. So we're not trying to do everything at once, right? If we're taking customer communication automation as an example, let's do one, launch it, make sure it's reaching the right people. No one's panicking. No one's saying I got this complaint from this customer about these annoying emails. Make sure that it's relevant, that we get good feedback on it. Yeah. Then continue to build and launch more. Because I think, I think doing too much too soon also can be problematic for other reasons, but especially for building trust with your CSMs, that's the way to do it. Just do a little bit at a time. Make sure they're bought into it.
What's that like? That you've said customer outreach, automating that. What specifically? I want to drill into that specifically. What's the outreach that you want to have automated?
For us, it's adoption related. So depending on the tools, depending on the customers, of course, they're engaging with our products at different moments during, if I take fashion as an example, during the fashion season. So maybe they always use our events tool. It's usually the easiest one for people to understand. Events tool during fashion week makes sense. You have a fashion show, you're going to use the events tool. But you can be using events for pop-ups, dinner parties, all these other events that fashion brands, industry brands are putting on. But it might not always click for them, right? Same thing for customers. They're kind of just used to doing things in one way. So reaching out to them in an automated way of hey, you could use events for other things. If we have the data that's showing, hey, they haven't created an event since whatever it might be, 60 days, 90 days, we have magic triggers depending on the behaviors and the time periods, obviously, but largely related to adoption.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Have you built
That's
out?
actually the.
Oh, sorry, Josh.
Nope,
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go.
Yep.
So, Tatiana, so it sounds like right now it's a little bit reactive, right? Because it's based on things your customers aren't doing. Are you working to pivot that strategy so that your digital approach actually is more proactive with your customers?
Yes. And I wouldn't say we're all reactive, but particularly with the smaller ones, yes. Like we definitely are way more reactive with the smaller ones. Because again, you have a CSM that's expected to be reaching so many customers, where when you get the larger customers, you have a smaller book.
Yeah, it's a different model completely.
Exactly. So yes, the pivot is to make those small customers not only be more proactive in reality, but also feel it, right? You want to make sure that your customers also feel like you're being proactive with them and supported by you. So that's a shift for us for sure.
I think we're probably reaching a point where so I get it. Like if a customer doesn't accomplish like a milestone metric, that's a risk, and you want to make sure that they're engaged and have the proper usage. I think we're probably reaching a point with AI where we should also, to Kristi's point, to be more proactive, we should be able to read the breadcrumbs of the other activity that would normally lead up to that milestone activity, and then be able to, with a certain probability threshold, say, okay, ding, 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 this person is at risk, not even to get to that point where we would normally, ping them, and that might be too late almost. That's just my thoughts there.
Well, I think, this big blank space for me too, we've been doing these episodes almost every week now for a couple of years. And we talk a lot about how the digital tools are kind of helping us be more proactive, or helping us be more, in front of customers. But we don't actually see it, because if a tool is sending an email proactively, what is the individual doing with that data, right? And I think there's this education gap when it comes to CSMs and leadership to say, hey, great. Yeah. I just had a bunch of stuff go out. My new process is not sending emails and waiting for responses. It's actually analyzing the data based on those triggers, right? Because it's almost like you say I'm being proactive, but I'm actually just kind of sitting in the background looking at data that doesn't feel proactive, right? It's always kind of getting to that next action that may be an automated thing. So this isn't a question. It's more of just kind of a general statement that I'm feeling is, as we get more tools that are claiming to be more proactive, we actually find more CSMs that just kind of sit and say, okay, what do I do next? And they wait for the tool to tell them, which is not a proactive response. It is a proactive outreach, but then there's that kind of big Venn diagram of how are we encouraging and engaging our CSMs to stay proactive with data analysis. And like you said, following those breadcrumbs.
And the other huge part, I think, is enablement, right? Or having the right skill set, let's say, maybe the skill set that you expect of your CSMs is also shifting. It's shifting for us. It shifts every few years, right? But it's a great point, and a big point for me and for us is understanding, okay, what types, let's say, the different roles, the different profiles of the CSMs, what are the skills that we really need for each role and profile? Because it might not be the same for us in terms of specialization, but also in terms of the role itself, right? Someone who's more of an entry level versus mid or senior. Sometimes you have a senior CSM who thinks they know it all and can do it all, but maybe that's something they know nothing about, right? Really understanding the data behind whatever it might be, right? We're talking about, again, automation, but there's so much other data that we sit on, quote unquote. And even figuring that out, what data is going to help me in being truly proactive with my customers. And I would be very, very confident in saying that it's rare today to maybe find so many CSMs who have that skill set already, because it's a new need from the industry, right? So how do we also, it's a question I've asked myself a lot. How do we better enable the people that we do have to get to that point?
What's your next step, Tatiana? You've been with the company for 9 years. I'm not asking you if you're leaving or anything like that. I'm just saying, what's growth look like for you in the new year?
Yeah. So I guess it all depends, to be very honest. We're now a part of Lectra, so I'm sure that has some new challenges that will present itself. We're integrating slowly but surely, but I've also always said the reason I've stayed is because things change, right? I think when you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, that's kind of where you start maybe getting bored. We change a lot. So I'm sure the Lectra acquisition will be some new changes. But even within the existing org that I have, I touched on it before, we're still figuring out some parts of it and how to rework it out. The last acquisition we made before we were acquired, those teams are still being integrated into the post-sales org. And a lot of those teams have more professional services type of background. So a lot of enablement and figuring out, where do these, people sit long-term? Where does it make sense? Is it more of a CS role? Is it more of a professional services role? Is it something in between? And we've been trying that out this year. So having a kind of mixed role, if I can call it that, having your traditional CS responsibilities with a layer of professional services built in. So I'm hoping that we figure that out and finalize it in 2025 so that we have a true smooth sailing, let's say, post-sales org, because this year has been a lot of learning.
Learnings for everybody.
Yep, exactly.
Well, it sounds like a dynamic environment. It sounds like a lot of growth and learning there for sure. And we wish you the absolute very best towards the end of this year and into the new year. And I'd be remiss in not sharing with our listeners here, if you're not watching the YouTube of this, with Kristi darting in and out of this meeting for some unknown reason.
It just keeps kicking her out.
It does. It doesn't want me. So you know how hard it is to come back in and try to be part of a conversation where you miss like at least 1 to 2 minutes at a time?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you know what? Yeah. I'm going to try that. Next time I don't want to engage. I'm just going to try doing that technique.
Shoot.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm frozen.
My job. Yeah. No, but I wanted to just say that wasn't the point. The point was like Kristi has the nicest Pier 1 Imports display that I've seen of Christmas swag and setup.
As a huge Christmas fan, I deeply appreciate the background. I have to say.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. With a fireplace, how cozy. I love it.
I put a lot of work into my aesthetic and my background, Josh. So I'm going to pretend like you're not being sarcastic and that you actually appreciate it.
He is paying you a compliment.
We don't know. You can never tell.
No. In my way, I am. I mean, listen, I'm sitting here with the camera angled up to the ceilings that you can't see, like my messy bed in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house in Connecticut. So I'm one to talk.
Yeah.
We'll leave
He's
on that
got a
note.
session with this therapist right after this to work through that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Tatiana, this was great.
Thank you all. It was great chatting with you guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.